We will go ahead and start with the pledge. And I will lead. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. Welcome, everyone, on this first day of winter. What better place to be than inside at a school board meeting, right, Dr. Brown? And we did have another very nice commendation ceremony today at 5:30, recognizing a lot of excellent work and excellent talent by students in the district and some staff as well, and that's always fun to do, which makes us a little bit late for exec, which makes us slightly late for our public meeting start, and we apologize for that, and we're going to move right along and look for someone perhaps would recommend some modifications to the agenda, and that someone probably will be Brad.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that on the consent agenda that we remove personnel recommendations and place that on the agenda under school district business. So Danielle, that will become Roman numeral 5, 6th item. And then with that report, if you go to Roman numeral 6, within that report, we'd like to remove the position speaking to yearbook advisor.
At this time.
At this time. And then we're going to go back to the consent agenda. And I would like to add a supplemental personnel report dated today. Also, another one that is labeled supplemental Roman 2, and add that to the consent agenda as well.
Makes sense to me.
I wasn't even going to ask her if it made sense, I was just going to ask her if she got it.
It makes perfect sense.
Okay, it's, as we say, as long as Danielle gets it correctly, we're good for the historic record. Anything else, Brad?
That was it tonight.
Okay. Without objection, we'll move on, and we will accept those modifications, and we'll go ahead to receiving comments from public, staff, etc. No one signed up, but anyone wish to speak? I'm not seeing anyone, so we'll keep moving. And so we'll go on to student reps, and Seth's talking to LECS, but you're already talking, so go ahead.
Well, Ned isn't here today, but Cycle 1 ended on Friday, so Cycle 2 started today, which means that seniors are completing their self-reflections for this cycle, and teachers are writing evaluations for all students. The Site-Based Council is meeting this Thursday at ECS for our second meeting. Family groups have started to do a lot of fundraising, so there are bake sales going on, and the LACS French trip is taking scrap metal as part of their fundraising plan at LACS. And the Akwesasne Freedom School is visiting ACS right now. The community service class has been hosting them, and they visit every year in the fall, and then the community service class will go and visit the Akwesasne School in the spring, and it's something that's been going on for about 17 years, so it's something that we really value at our school.
Excellent, thanks. Ithaca High.
So this past Saturday, the Ithaca High School cross country team did very well at states, and they move on to the Federations meet, which is this upcoming Saturday. The boys soccer team lost 1-0 to Arlington, but they had a really great season. The end of the 10 weeks was Friday. On November 19th, Dr. Brown will be holding a forum on technology in the classroom at the high school, and the spring musical is Legally Blonde, and that was announced on Thursday.
IHS teacher peer reviews are continuing across multiple classes. The girls' varsity swim team will be sending all 3 relays to the state meet, which will be held next Friday and Saturday at Ithaca College. The early decision deadline passed for most colleges on November 8th, and guidance counselors were extremely helpful in navigating problems that occurred with the new version of the Common Application. This past weekend, Model UN brought back several awards from their latest conference. And this Thursday at 7 p.m., the winter sports kickoff will be held in Culp Auditorium.
Very good. Anything else? Excellent. Anything from the board at this time? Responses? Anyone? Very good. Arlington was the #1 team ranked in the state, I believe, for the big schools, AA schools. So that was a tremendous effort by the soccer team.
Oh yeah, Rob, on that soccer, not only was it a tremendous effort, but the only goal scored was on a penalty kick. So we held them scoreless in real play. Other than that penalty kick, they would not have scored on us. So that's pretty impressive for us to compete at that level.
Sean, go ahead.
And a couple of board members had a chance to, I see we have our Caroline Cougar t-shirts. I know we'll be talking about Caroline, but we had a chance to be out there for the opening of the outdoor classroom. What a phenomenal event and celebration of community. So thank you for hosting us, and thank you for the work of the good folks to make that classroom space available. It was engaging and a good example of how to merge new forms of learning. So that was great. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. I guess we'll move on, so we can keep moving. And consent agenda with modifications noted.
I move the consent.
Second?
Second by Pat. Any other questions at this time? Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, can we speak to the consideration of accounts real quick since we haven't had a finance meeting?
I've got to pull it up. Is there a question or?
Yeah, tell me more. If someone could tell me what, there's a bunch of transfers, I guess that was it.
Just routine transfers.
And there was, this was on the consent, there was something later about a BOCES that was pulled.
Yeah.
That was pulled.
Okay,
That wasn't ready.
I withdraw my question.
Just routine transfers of $2 million.
Okay.
But that does happen from time to time between the accounts. That has to be a rebalancing of where the funds are. So, anything else? All in favor? That's everyone. Then we'll move on. And Dr. Brown.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. You mentioned the combination ceremony. I wish to thank the community, the staff, and students who showed up for yet another outstanding event. We're starting to get folks call and email in anticipation of these events now. Wanted to know what the criteria is to be recognized, and wanted to know when they could just come be a part of it. We will. And I'm letting Danielle know this now. We will be sending out a press release to recognize all the young people and adults who were recognized this evening. So just thank you to everyone for participating in that great event. It was also mentioned that I will be, the village at Ithaca is hosting me next week, Tuesday afternoon, 6:30 at GIAC for a conversation about technology, mobile technology usage in the classroom. And what we're doing here as an organization. I think some of the national conversations, the regional conversations are sparking a lot of conversations here locally. Last week and today was a Common Core, and I think what we're doing is out there in front and is influencing a lot of folks. And now when you read a lot about failed technology implementations across the country, LA Unified is one example, the Oakland County schools. So that's yet another hot topic, so folks are wondering what we're doing as far as thinking about those tools in our classrooms and why we're doing it. So we're going to engage in that conversation next Tuesday as well. I want to remind folks that we're currently live tweeting the board meetings using the hashtag ICSD BOE. So if you're following from wherever or whenever, you can actually write in your comments or your thoughts or questions, and we're following that as well. And one last thing, he's not here tonight, but I just wanted to share a special thank you to Jeff Tomasic, who's done an outstanding job, not only as a great building level leader and a leader in our organization, but he stepped up. Dr. Lori Bruce Jawo has been out with the birth of her child. She's on the way. She's coming back. She started back today. But Jeff has stepped in and has taken on some central responsibilities and helped out immensely. He's just a great leader. I just wanted to publicly thank him because I know that community was a little nervous about him helping us at Central Office. I think we were stealing him, but he's been able to do both jobs very well for the last couple of months. I wanted to thank Jeff for what he's done for us. And that's about it. We have a lot to come later, so.
Very good, Dr. Brown. Thank you. It is interesting that we're getting emails now from folks saying, I'm sorry, we are going to miss commendation ceremony, and so we appreciate that, but certainly it's always very good. It's a very good evening. Are we good? Very good, Dr. Brown. And so on to school district business, and we will get right to continuous improvement efforts at Caroline and Enfield.
And Boyd.
Sorry, and Boyd. We have enough chairs, apparently. Well, it's always good to see everyone. Good to see Joe, Lisa, and Mary here tonight. We get to see the other guys fairly often, but it's always great to see the principals from the other leaders in this district. So it's great that you're here tonight.
So thank you for having us tonight. Our goal tonight is to hear from each school, Caroline, Enfield, and Boynton, specifically the principals from each school, to talk about the local assistance plan. So as we go through this presentation, after just a brief overview, the first thing we'll do is talk about why these three schools were identified for a local assistance plan. It's based on some lagging data from 2 years ago, but we will get a little bit into more detail about why those schools were selected or required to have a plan for this upcoming year. We're going to hear from each principal to talk about certain aspects of their plan, and then just do a brief summary. And as we go through the entire thing, just like always, if you have questions, just let us know. You'll see a few strands as we go through today, and hopefully what each principal is talking about, there's obviously some unique things with each building, but there are some commonalities that are being implemented in these three schools and across most or all of our school buildings that we've been spending time at the board meetings discussing. One of the things that's in place at all three schools is instructional coaching. And so this just gives me a brief opportunity to give a quick update on our implementation of instructional coaching. We have it in 4 of our elementary schools. Enfield and Caroline are 2 of those. We have it in all 3 middle schools. All the instructional coaches, all 7 of them, have completed their first round of coaching cycles with teachers in the building. That cycle is about a 6-7 week period where they work one-to-one with the teacher to implement new things in the classroom, give feedback, and learn from that process. We're happy to note that each coach has a waiting list for their services, and that we're already kind of strategizing ways to deal with that. And so that may be in next year's budget process, obviously, but also just looking at this year. And so we've been very pleased with the rollout. Each school, the rollout was communicated in a very clear, consistent way across the buildings. And I think that has been a big part of having a smooth startup. Another thing at the elementary level that we've been implementing across all of the buildings this year is Imagine Learning. Last year we just had it in place in Bell Sherman and BJM and Enfield, just like the last 2 weeks of the school year got started in their lower grades. And so we have it up and running at every single elementary school across the district. We feel that work obviously will have a major impact on student achievement across all of our buildings, especially these 2. And I think at last count, we have about 1,800 student accounts active and going across the 8 schools. So that leaves us with about 700 students who haven't sort of enrolled in it yet. That we feel like that's way ahead of kind of the schedule we set for ourselves, and so we're pleased with that implementation so far. And then lastly, one of the things that you'll see a strand between these schools is the amount of sort of job-embedded professional development that's been occurring at the elementary and middle school level, and high school obviously too. So there's been release days for elementary teachers and middle school teachers, and just some very strongly facilitated work that's having all of our teachers really reflect on commonalities that should exist between our schools and ways we could be implementing our curriculum or developing our curriculum better, and also focusing on instructional strategies and whatnot. Last piece, one thing we're really focusing on with professional development is follow-through and follow-up. So this summer we did a 2-day institute with about 45 teachers and all of our administrators with John and Snetti around PLC work. We're happy to note that we started a second cohort in that process, and they started last Friday of last week. We had about 45 teachers. All of our school buildings were represented with about four-person teams, and they are going through the same training that folks went through in the summertime. And our January 31st, I want to say, district-wide PLC day, we'll have John coming back to work in some way or another with all of our teachers. And so we're making sure that our professional development, whether it's both internal or with external folks, has a lot of follow-up, and it's just not one-shot affairs. So just with that brief overview, we're going to, on our next slide, just look at, there was a slide for, or maybe that's at the end, the slide for the schools that were selected, or that's at the end, okay, sorry. So we're going to start with Caroline.
Great. So at Caroline, there are 3 things that are coming to the top when we're looking at the local assistance plan. And so I want to speak to how we've launched the school year and what the results have been thus far and what we hope to grow. So the first is relational trust and its relationship to student achievement. So essentially, based on a study of Chicago Public Schools by Barbara Schneider in a book, Trust in Schools, the indicator for student achievement in really high-functioning schools is how adults work together, collaborate, and think about, and talk about student learning and instruction. So at the beginning of the year, at our staff retreat, we took the survey that was developed in that book as a whole staff. And some of the questions were things like, it's a Likert scale 1 to 10, and they ask, I respect a colleague who takes the lead in a school improvement effort. My principal is personally supportive of my professional development efforts. And school leaders who go for affirmative responses to those questions have a gain in student achievement. Why? Because teachers, where there's relational trust, teachers engage in really honest conversations about their craft. They admit failure. They take risks. And this is what we want to grow. So how are we going to do it? Well, what we've seen in the beginning of the school year is in our PLCs, we're really starting to spend time looking at student work. And I'm humbled to be part of these conversations with teachers and watch teachers come to faculty meetings with a stack of student work and not spending time talking about, oh, this is what I had hoped they would say, or you know, it was kind of a bad day. Teachers are, it's such a personal craft that to share what your students are doing is intense. And so I've been really humbled to see them come to faculty meetings, which are more of a professional learning community now, because we've pushed a lot of transactional items to emails, and go through a stack of student work using a sorting student work protocol and be able to lead and say, this is what I hope my students to learn next week, and this is one instructional strategy that I'm going to use. So that's really, that's a big shift when we think about how we use faculty meetings, which I get to have and be with staff at Caroline twice a month. And then, in addition to that, we're also modeling at faculty meetings. I share my lesson plans from when I was a classroom teacher for 13 years and say, okay, let's analyze this. Was this a rigorous lesson plan? Was there analysis in that? Push back. Where could I have done better? Because we want to build that relational trust. There's no shame in not knowing how to do something. And that's what we want to talk about with each other, and we want our students to be able to articulate and talk about with us. And then the last thing is place-based education. So thank you for referencing the Caroline Wilderness Campus, and thank you for your support on that, because it's truly a huge asset for Caroline that we have these 3 outdoor classrooms and a wilderness trail. So you will hear staff at Caroline and parents and kids using this phrase place-based ed. And it's one phrase, and it's somewhat, I want to demystify the jargon of it, because you could say inquiry-based instruction or environmental education, but essentially what it means is that students become agents of change and feel a sense of purpose by identifying a challenge in their community. That's the first layer. Then the second layer is that they launch into a series of questions and interdisciplinary units to find a solution. And the last piece is that they have an authentic audience and a way to share what they've learned with the community. So at the Wilderness Campus, one example were 5th grade students who were out along the trail with an animal they had researched and taken questions on it. Another example happened just this week when there were 3 students standing in a hallway after lunch refusing to move because there were birds that were flying into a window. And they were really upset, and they were not moving. And an educator in the building handed them a notebook and said, take a minute and see what you see, write what you see. And then they chose at lunch to spend a lot more time observing the animals, the birds. And they had an idea that we're going to make these black silhouettes on the window, and then they'll know it's a window. And they were wrong, because the birds still kept hitting into the window, but they learned that. And I gave them some field guides, and they went home at night, and they came back the next day, and they said, we got it. It's the berries that they're eating outside the window. They're intoxicated. And my mom told me what intoxicated meant. And so when you go to Caroline, that's what you'll see in the middle hallway. You will see evidence of students.
Intoxicated
really
birds.
Yes, that.
Be careful where you're parking.
I don't want this to be the takeaway.
Sorry, Mary, go ahead.
Let me rephrase. So you'll see this window with silhouettes.
You never know where the
You'll
lesson
see-
plan's going to go.
You never know. You'll see student research framed and displayed in classrooms along that window in my office. And I think what I'm most excited about and really thrilled for our students is that text in which the students took home that night and read was at a middle school reading level. It was a field guide. And as we're pushing students to have 50% of their reading diet be informational and 50% fiction, it's these authentic opportunities where they can go home, even if they're in 1st grade, and engage with these texts, and then come back to our community and share it. So that is what you'll see at Caroline right now, what we want to grow even more, and we're really thankful for your support.
How do you want me to do? We can go through all schools first. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question, just to go back from the start? We're here for the leadership assistant plan.
Yeah, you want to talk about
Okay, yeah, I just want to get some
Context.
clarity on,
it?
just an explanation of the purpose, the reason, just,
Yeah,
Because
we're going to address that.
all right,
What you're hearing now is the bulk of the plans. So at the end, we'll talk about why
okay.
schools are on that and what their plan entails.
They don't want to do it your way, Seth, so. But so we're going to hear from all 3, and then you're going to talk a bit more, but we'll do questions at that point. Okay, all right. We'll let it go this time. So Lisa, go ahead. Yeah, definitely. Without interruption, please.
Okay, so I have sort of 4 things to highlight that are happening at Enfield this year. The first is the collaborative teaching model that we have developed. This is actually our 2nd year working with this model, and basically what I've done is I've worked with teachers, specifically reading teachers and special education teachers, to sort of break them out of their box of their job description, and they are based within 2 classrooms as co-teachers. So for instance, in my building, a reading teacher might be co-teaching in one 1st grade classroom and one 2nd grade classroom. And what this does is that it affords a teacher, one full-time classroom teacher and another teacher in the room 50% of the day. So what we're trying to do is develop some really strong and flexible models of teaching. So when you have that kind of power in a classroom, all of a sudden 2 teachers, you can do some really creative things to meet diverse needs of students. So they can share a lesson, they can run center time, and you can have 2 teachers pulling intensive groups. I have grade levels that are doing walk-to models, so that the reading and special education teacher can put their eyes and their lens of expertise on certain kids within 2 grade levels. So this kind of model has worked really well for us, and it is something that we're hoping to grow to have what we call them learning pods, which sounds sort of spacey, but basically like in a learning pod there's 4 classroom teachers and then a reading teacher and a special ed teacher, and these people are a really tight team. So if kids come up with concerns for any reason, they have academic concerns, we have kids who have enrichment concerns, then I feel like I have the right people at the table because I have 2 adjacent grade levels. So we can help students who have some challenges, but we can also forward students who need to be enriched. So it's kind of been a way for us to do that. In addition to that, I have 2 math intervention specialists that are also, one is primary and one is intermediate, that are providing additional math support in the school, and also have a language acquisition coach who's basically now in like the early primary area providing service. So that part of the plan is really maximizing teaching and teaching time so that you can maximize learning. So that's some restructuring that we've done there. The second point is sort of piggybacking a little bit on what Mary mentioned in terms of faculty meeting and that PLC infusion, in that we, as a school, are taking a very close look at the work of John Antonetti and purposefully modeling our faculty meetings in a dynamic professional learning community style, which also means all administrivia is reserved for like the weekly memo or email. So we don't do any of that stuff in faculty meeting anymore. My teachers know when they come to a faculty meeting, they need to bring something to write with, to reflect, to do some personal reflection, which is a huge shift. The first time I asked my teachers to reflect this year, it was really hard for them. And I realized, wow, like teachers don't ever take that time to think about their day, or enough time to think about their day in the presence of their colleagues, and then have some time to actually share with them. So we have like moments of silence during faculty meetings where everyone's sort of taking a minute or 2 to write about like, what did I do that was rigorous today? What's an example of a lesson I taught that had high levels of thinking in it? When during my day did I have a student experience that aha moment? So they're taking some time to reflect on those things and then share out. We're also really taking some time as a building to consider the things that we believe will move student achievement forward at Enfield. because I'm a firm believer sometimes that answer is in the room and among the people that are sitting in the room. And we're really taking some time to build that and come up with some really practical goals that can translate right into the classroom, right into daily practice. So no longer are we having these lofty visions of year-long goals. We're focusing on the here and the now and the present moment. And that is a huge shift for teachers. But I must tell you that I have had a lot of compliments on having more interactive style faculty meetings. They like it, they leave feeling energized, and they look forward to coming because I always promise like a moment of fun. That's well. The third point I want to highlight is probably something that may be unique to Enfield this year in that we're piloting curriculum. And it's called Visual Thinking Strategies. I wrote a learning innovation grant last year. And basically, what visual thinking strategies is teaching kids to think and have conversations around works of art. I think there's a slide there we go. So it's a curriculum that I bring to Ithaca from my former life as an enrichment coordinator in Binghamton. And it was something that we successfully infused there in grades K through 12. What it does, really, in a nutshell, is it teaches teachers to talk less and students to talk more. So one of the things we know about economically disadvantaged students is they often come to school with not as great of a vocabulary as some of their peers. So this is a conversational strategy. It's all talk. And the teacher, if you look at the white text there, asks 3 simple questions. What's going on in this picture? What do you see that makes you say that? And then what more can you find? So with open-ended questions like that, it is up to the group of students in front of you to look at a very interesting image like that and construct meaning. The teacher never imposes value. The teacher's job during discussions like this is really to point to the things the students are talking about. Most important, to paraphrase using rich language. So for instance, if a student were to look at that picture and say, I see a woman who is looking out the window and it looks like there's a man who's playing an instrument. The facilitator would find a different way of saying that back to the student, inserting some rich vocabulary and some synonyms, hoping that students will then try those as they continue to talk about pictures. So that's visual thinking strategies. We're piloting it in grades 1, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 4th. And we have a trainer. She did a phenomenal workshop with a core group of teachers this summer. She's coming back to visit us again multiple times. She's coming back December 4th to do some collaborative coaching and sharing of ETS lesson with teachers. This is that job-embedded professional development again. And then we'll continue to provide professional development after school. So that's going to happen multiple times throughout the year. The last thing that I want to highlight in Enfield is we do recognize that we need to strengthen and build our relationships with our families. So there are some things, some very exciting things that are happening. One of the most exciting things is we utilized some Title I funding this summer to initiate a home visit pilot. You know, our pre-K teachers talk about how meaningful and how inspiring that contact is. Part of the pre-K program that they go and visit a home and talk about expectations of school, answer parents' questions, frankly, just do a lot of listening. So one of the things I did at the end of last year is the pre-K teachers met with the early primary grades, shared some information, and we had teachers who were interested go out. We visited over 30 families this summer. We went to them. I went, teachers went, sometimes the school social worker went. It was so much fun. And the kids were just so excited that we were there. Really, really powerful. Families were thrilled that we would actually take the time to come out to them during the summer and listen to their concerns about school, something that we definitely want to expand this summer. The other thing that we're doing is I've talked with our PTA president for redesigning our PTA meetings this year. So I've kind of worked with the president. We've decided that at least half the PTA meetings need to be tied to a family-centered event focused on learning. So for instance, this month we're having Imagine Learning Night, where parents are invited with their students to kind of show them the program. Eric Miller is going to be there and talk to them a little bit about Imagine Learning and what their children are experiencing. We also have a science night, an arts night, a literacy night, and a math night planned for this year. Hoping to bring more families in with their kids so that we can talk about learning. The next thing that we're doing is this Friday, a parent-teacher conference day, as a matter of fact. We coordinated with the Overlook Community Center. We're going to be able to hold conferences there. So teachers that have students that live in Overlook can actually chunk a time of their day. The community center has offered to open its doors between 11 and 5. So if parents can't get to us, then we'll go there to them, which should be a nice shift. I'm really interested to see how many folks take advantage of that. And the last thing we're doing to strengthen our relationships with families and among students and staff, of course, is our positive behavior intervention support. That's PBIS, that acronym. A lot of elementary schools are kicking that off. So we're teaching, recognizing, celebrating positive behavior throughout the school. We just had our very first recognition ceremony at the end of October, where students received Golden Feather Awards. Our new mascot is the eagle, and came up and actually spoke about how they showed that they were safe in different areas of the school, pre-K through 5. It was an amazing ceremony. So we're hoping to continue those throughout the year.
Very good.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I'm not even on the written agenda, so I get the hint. I'm going to be brief. At Boynton Middle School, one of the things I'd like to start with is mentioning that the initiatives that we're taking are directed towards making the school more responsive to student needs and staff needs and building a culture of respect. So the slides that you will see are centered around this, making the school more responsive to what the students actually need at Boynton and providing those needs, meeting those needs. So to get it started, what we did was I shared all the data I had with the staff members, because there's no need to keep anything secret. So the data that I had from the state, I shared it with the staff. And after that, a lot of interesting things came along. We did staff surveys, we did interviews with parents, with teachers, with students. We did walkthroughs of classrooms. So we collected a lot of data in order to guide our next steps. And one of the things that came out was, and I'll refer to this later on too, is when we presented all this data to the staff, the question was, okay, we know we have students who are in need. Who are the students? Because right now they're looking at a bunch of numbers from the state, how it is broken down by the standards and everything, but who are these students? So we actually did an analysis and came up with students' names, and we started a mentoring program at Boynton. And I will talk about that later on too in this. But let me start by talking first about RTI and AIS. So The reason why we're focusing in on RTI and AIS is to increase its efficiency in how we target students in need. Now, RTI, we're in a 2.0 phase at Boynton. And what that means is we've moved everything to an electronic platform. Previously, it used to be paper and email. So let's say there are some teachers who are in the cross team who are not at the grade level meeting. Now a student was talked about at the grade level meeting, and these teachers have valuable input to give. Well, they're not at the meeting. They can't come there. So now their response is coming after the fact. By moving it to an electronic platform, everyone is on the same page because these teachers can put in their input before the meeting even happens. So that when the grade level meets, they already have input from the cross-team staff members. Makes it much more real time. Also, the passwords and all that we have aligned for, let's say, our 6th grade RTI team, when they go to the 7th grade, the 7th grade now just uses the same password or a different password, but all that information is already electronically stored so that when the students transition from 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9, going into high school, the information about the students is electronic and can be accessed by anyone who needs it, who has a need to know basis, which makes it much more efficient. Instead of looking for paper copies or trying to figure out where is that folder about the student, now it is electronic. So it's much more responsive, provided vertical and horizontal alignment for us. We looked at the AIS model also. It should stand for intervention. It ended up being a year-long placement for kids. They end up in AIS in September, and now they're staying in it all the way up to June, almost like a regular class. That was not the intent of AIS. AIS was an intervention to help a student who was a little bit behind, to help them catch up, and that was the purpose of AIS. So what we did was we revamped the AIS model at Boynton. What we're doing is we're doing a very close monitoring of the students who are in AIS classes. So the student is placed there. The teacher monitors the student very closely. The AIS teachers have conversations about the kid. And let's say at the 5-week period, we actually had some students who had come up to par. So now instead of being in an AIS class, these students are now in their classes and they're being monitored as opposed to being in an AIS class. That frees up some space for other students who are now in need to move into these AIS classes. So it makes it much more fluid and flexible as opposed to, well, I'm sorry, we can't put you in AIS because the seats are filled. I don't like that. So we're making it much more fluid. Mr. Harris? Yes, sir.
I don't even mean to do this, but I have to understand what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
I was under the impression, and I'm assuming some of my colleagues were as well, that AIS was a service, not a push-in service. Even if it resulted in a student being removed from the classroom, that was supposed to be a burst of opportunity. Are you saying that we actually were running AIS classes in Boynton, where the student was pulled out for the entire period of time? Or maybe running a parallel system with that to regular classroom instruction?
Well, the students who were put in the AIS classes stayed in it for a really long period of time. What we're trying to do is make it responsive to what the level of the student is. Now, New York State has told us that when we look at AIS itself, the intervention services, an AIS class is one of the ways in which we can service those needs.
I'm asking a simpler question.
Yes.
I didn't even know AIS was a class.
It is. Yes, sir.
So it's a series of classes that run,
Yes, sir.
must be parallel to the regular days.
So what will happen oftentimes, they'll do a number of pre-teaching that'll occur in a class, that'll support the students in the class. You can't have folks that move into classes. You can see a wide variation of what kind of services students are receiving.
Right.
So what they're talking about with Boyd as well as many of our other schools in terms of where are students struggling and how can we help them most efficiently versus having a student placed in a class from Labor Day till June.
Right.
If they're not proficient.
So the kid in English who was struggling,
They were
Because they're
doing
literally
writing
taken
set.
out of that class and put into this other.
No. They would have an English class also, but when they were placed in AIS class, usually there is some other class that they're not able to take because now they have an AIS class in their schedule. What we're saying is, okay, at this moment in time, yes, the student needs that class. But we're going to closely monitor it because when the student can be moved out of that, it does open up a space so that some other things can be put in the student's schedule. So it is not like a
Period
place.
of the
Might
day.
replace the study hall.
Period of the day.
Might replace
Yes.
the study hall, some more intensive
An
work.
additional period of the day. That's what I was
Yeah,
missing.
middle high school level.
Professional development. On this slide, there are some things that we have undertaken at Boynton. Our focus has been on the Common Core learning standards, and the English department is also looking at the experiential learning modules. So one of the things that we really focused on was coordinating Boynton, DUET, and LACS in terms of release days, so that the teachers can work together on the Common Core standards and develop lesson plans, unit plans, and because this is something that we look at as a long-term initiative, Common Core standards in our classroom. So providing opportunities for these teachers. This has a direct impact on our students. We will also be looking at professional development through BOCES and the district. Our teachers are going through a variety of trainings. But the main thing is to increase the amount of time that teachers can collaborate with each other, to increase the level of collaboration among the teachers, and to make sure that it is responsive to staff needs. So, when they meet at the PLCs and everything, we want to make sure that it is responsive to what the teachers actually need to work on. So if they need to work on Module 2, let's say, in the Common Core, experiential learning, that is what we provide opportunities for. So it is a responsive professional development rather than this is set in stone. Going to extension and enrichment. This year what we've done is for all the students at Boynton in the 6th grade, we have introduced an enrichment class. Every student at Boynton has an enrichment class. The enrichment class focuses on math and reading skills. Our aim is that if we provide a lot of support in math and reading in the 6th grade to the students, then hopefully by the time the students get to the 8th grade, it should taper off the need for that extra support. So it is a lot of front loading. We are doing enrichment classes for every one of our students in the 6th grade. We've also got the 9th period, which we hold Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. We also have Saturday school, which has started. All of these are used to extend the school day for us, again, to meet student needs. And what we're looking at very closely is students who need to be in the class. We call their homes. We're building relationships with the families to make sure that the kids can stay. If transportation is an issue, we always make sure we talk to the family, explain that there is a late bus run so your kid can stay for it with us. So we are doing a lot of work to make sure we have the students who can actually stay in these programs. But these are some of the things that we're doing for extending the school day for Boynton students to meet their needs. When we come to community, there's a couple of things that we have started. We have doubled the number of PTA meetings from once a month to now twice a month. And the purpose is that if there is something happening, we'd rather know of it sooner if there is a question from the community rather than wait a month to come to know about it. So we have doubled the meeting. At every PTA meeting, we have guest speakers. So far, we've had guest speakers who have come and spoken to the parents about the Common Core learning standards. We've had guest speakers who have come and spoken to the parents about DASA. We're also planned for the rest of the year, guest speakers coming and talking to our parents about transition to the high school, which is a big thing, talking about high-stakes testing. So these are all topics which we believe will be relevant to the community, and we are incorporating this into our PTA meeting so that it's not just a meeting in some question and answers, but rather something informative, followed by a session where they can ask the guest speaker questions related to that. We have done things to increase student participation. A couple of quick examples. When we have the dances at Boynton, if a student comes and, they don't want to dance, they're not coming to the dance anymore. So what we would do, what we've done this year is we have opened up the gym along with the dances. It's a real small thing to do, but every dance, we've had 2 dances so far, we have consistently had about 30 to 40 kids more this year than we had last year because the kids want to come and play in the gym. Now they still participate with their friends, but just because they don't want to dance doesn't mean they cannot come and be a part of this social event. So opening up the gym really opened it up for us. We're building a culture of respect within Boynton and building relationships. The mentoring program is something we started this year, and our hope is to build up on it. So we initially started with 34 students we wanted to have a mentor for. So every student has at least 1 staff member. Most of them have 2 or 3 staff members as mentors. And we started with 34, but by the time I got done speaking to the teens, we were up to 51 because all of a sudden they wanted to come up with more student names to start the mentoring. So we've started the program this year. Our hope is to grow the program so that students who feel disenfranchised, disaffected from school, we don't have a relationship with school, they have an adult mentor who can connect with them outside the scope of just being a teacher or a counselor or a social worker. So that's the aim of the mentoring program. So we started that this year, and the staff really stepped up to it. And so we are glad about that. We will be moving it forward. This over here, over there you can see the Raptor. So that's the Cornell Raptor program. We are engaging with the community, getting that into our schools so that our students can see what is out there, get some interest into the real world. So that's the Cornell Raptor program. Below that you can see some students working with saws and all. There is a teacher there. You can't see the teacher, but there is a teacher there, Mr. Murphy. He's our tech teacher. And what these students are doing is, we have a Rashad Richardson Memorial Bench at Boynton. That fell into disrepair. You can see that it was, parts of it were falling. It wasn't safe for students to sit on. So these students who are part of the Boynton Woodworking Club are actually redesigning and recreating this bench in collaboration with the Richardson family. Again, an example of bringing the community into the school and making the school a part of the community. So we've done the concrete laying, and now they're building the bench, and pretty soon we'll invite all of you for the rededication for this. We'll let you know that. We had a student come to us from Britain, and when he went back to Britain, he was so happy with his experience at Boynton that his parents and his principal of the school in Manchester emailed me and said, we want to establish a relationship between the 2 schools so that, our kids can possibly go, but at least have video conferences with each other. So that's something, again, we're looking at. So as you can see, these are different things that we're doing at Boynton, because when we talk about a culture of respect, respect also means acknowledging the needs of everyone and moving forward with that. So community building is a huge part of what we're doing at Boynton. Opening up the gym, opening up the dances to students, bringing the outside world into Boynton. These are all things that we're working on. And the hope is that while this is called the Local Assistance Plan, the structures we are putting into place will be for years to come, not just for right now.
So our last slide, I think it speaks to Seth's question, what are these pieces? This local assistance plan, years ago, it's a much different designation than the former city plan. In essence, the state has captured data, as Matt opened a presentation with, the lagging data 2 years ago, took a look at our performance index, and in essence means are our cohort groups universally being successful. And I believe at Caroline and Enfield, our economically disadvantaged groups fell just below the threshold, and then at Boynton, our African American cohort fell just below the threshold. So in essence, the state has designed these local assistance plans, or at least a template to follow. I think a lot of times, Eldrin in particular will point out where our compliance issue piece is, where our larger piece is getting after making sure that our instruction is strong, our communities are strong around our schools. You have 3 examples examples of three very distinct schools that are defining how they are going after this local assistance plan. Not so much just in the compliance piece, but you hear the deep love for learning, the deep involvement of their communities, and how they're going after making sure that all students are successful. And that's what we wanted to do tonight and frame that for you. Local assistance plan, in essence, requires that the principals come and speak to you as a board to give you an indication of what they're going after in their schools, and ask you as a board to, in essence, vote on these plans. These are multi-layered plans. They're in your Dropbox that you can flip through and take a look. The template is a universal template. So whereas 10% of all schools around New York State are now local assistance plan schools, they all follow the same template. But as you can see, we're not interested in that lockstep check off the boxes piece. We're going after big things in this district, and frankly, to recognize that lagging data from 2 years ago will continue to impact us. We see ourselves in a much different place 2 years later. So it isn't that we ignore that by any stretch of the imagination. We're here to make sure that all students are successful and are going at it in a number of ways. So with that being said, we can answer any questions that you may have. Judy first.
On the CINE program, we got money. We do not get money for this.
No.
Is there still a CINE plan?
No.
That has evolved over the last few years. It was a few years ago, correct, Jason?
That's correct. Yeah, I want to say the last implementation was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
The high school and
Yeah.
We'd be happy.
High school and do it, I believe.
Well, we'd be happy if the state would just meet their state education, state aid calculation, much less anything else for the local assistance plan.
It took us a little bit of time in the fall to read a bit about what thresholds were broken and where we're looking to get out of it. So when Mr. Har talks about engaging the staff, the community, and what the are to build, those are some pretty exciting things.
There were timelines under the old requirements from the state regarding CINE, timelines for LAP.
It's an annual designation.
do you get off, or if you're okay with,
80 years, each year you can
Yeah.
but,
yeah, you can get off.
So all your cohort groups.
yeah, but the test is not the same.
Welcome to the New York State Education Board.
So I think the problem's going to be, it's going to take a while to get off.
Well, I think if I could address a little bit, I think what I'm hearing tonight is I'm not hearing about getting off a list, getting off. I'm hearing about programs, initiatives at these schools that I believe you are going to continue to use. And Common Core is going to drive a lot of this anyway. And Joe, I do have to say that DeWitt has had their gym open for dances like for a long time. I mean, my kid's a senior at Cornell, and they were. They were. The guys would be downstairs in this gym, and the girls would be upstairs. And then every once in a while, the girls would come through the gym and go back. There's a flow, Joe. You just got to go with the flow. And Joe, it's not a question that you're not on the agenda. It's just the other question is, okay, where are the T-shirts, Joe? I mean, where's my Boynton T-shirt for the alums?
Well, where's my Enfield one?
Well, no, I'm not. Elementary is different. Joe's.
We have a nice T-shirt.
But anyway, well, obviously, Marion Grove Road and Caroline is
Scored 1 point here.
more than one probably.
PTA.
We have probably real questions, but go ahead. So.
First of all, I've been in the gym a lot, and this large won't fit me now that I've, bulked up.
You need a medium?
The superintendent had to almost leave the room on that.
He's my trainer. So I don't want to. I have a way of thinking about things, and it may not fit in the educational model of things. And I heard a lot of things spoken about tonight, but the way I approach this aspect of these plans are to simply say, we as school leaders, we identified, we weren't serving these kids well, or these kids didn't perform on this assessment, or whatever the how you want to phrase that, and then have a basis of understanding what happened, and then, bring a plan forward that says, to address, what we assess as something that we weren't doing or something that needs to be done now going forward this year. We realized, kids weren't reading enough at home. So we got with the Red Bookshelf and Family Reading Partnership, and now, it was, I heard more kind of general good teaching practices, teaching and building leadership practices, but what I'm really looking for is I don't know if it's a negative deficit model, or I don't know if I'm thinking the right way or the proper way here, but, when we have a plan based on a result, I'd like to see more, and I'm sure you've thought about this, I just wasn't seeing that connection between what happened 2 years ago, whether it's old or not, and it's not even a 2-year thing. It's consistently, these groups are, we can switch them out, but typically these are the groups that we're not serving well. So, I'd just like to hear, before I can approve a plan, or I'd like to hear more targeted kind of, here's what we had, these are my thoughts on, correcting that or fixing it or adding to it or whatever, and then this is my expectation of it. And I heard some of that, but it's frustrating and difficult to not have it framed that way, and talk in pleasant anecdotes about fantastic learning spaces and experiences, but really the kind of nuts and bolts stuff that I'm sure you're working on is really what will be helpful to have me and us understand your plan and kind of take it to that basic level of 2 years ago this happened, I came in, I noticed we were lacking this, and I don't want to make it a negative like, oh, teachers weren't doing, but just community teachers, something needed to be added. So anyway, that's kind of how I'd like to talk a little bit about whatever these things are supposed to be.
Sure.
Yeah, just
So,
my thoughts.
Jump in.
At Boynton, one of the first things we did was, after we looked at the data, we figured out, okay, what do we do next? Because this is what the data is telling us. What
was that, Joe? That's what I'm like.
The whole staff. So we looked at the data from the state.
What was the data?
It was the state results
For
English and math. The New York State results, which gave us this designation, the LAP designation.
for African American.
Yes, so we looked at the subgroups and we looked at the entire data. So after looking at the data, we said, okay, what do we do next to make sure we have supports in place? So out of that came
Supports in place for what? So you look at it. So you look at the data.
Yeah.
And you determine,
the students.
phonics, like what did you pull out of that data that Chris Malcolm always talks to me about how he analyzes
the needle.
things on his job, in terms of.
So when we looked at the data, we looked at each subgroup as well. And out of that, we analyzed and we said, okay, at Boynton, these are the subgroups who did not perform up to our expectations, to the special needs kids and the African American subgroup. Then out of those subgroups and the economically disadvantaged subgroup also. So then looking at those subgroups, we said, okay, for the students we currently have in these subgroups, do we have the right supports in place? And if we do not, what are some of the
Joe,
things
let me
we
ask
want to
you,
do?
right there you said these groups didn't perform. What I'm looking for is the because. And how did you determine that? Because they weren't doing their homework, because they weren't supported, because they didn't have mentors, obviously, like what, that's what I want to know about.
Yes, so a couple of things came up. One was disengagement, when you look at the attendance data. For many of the students whom we identified, attendance was an issue. They were not part of any clubs. Okay, when we had extracurricular things, they were not part of it. So disengagement was a big part of it. So mentoring addressed that anyway. Then you start looking at academics. So when you look at academics, the 5-week reports, the marking period reports and all, The grades were low, but also the fact was that were these students actually taking advantage of the ninth period and the Saturday school that we had? And the answer was not a conclusive yes. So what we did now was we made phone calls to the homes of every one of the students whom we wanted to attend the ninth period classes. And we spoke to the parent and we said, your child has to be here. We added an incentive to the ninth period also, because on Wednesdays we have PLCs, right? So what we did was every other Wednesday, if a student is consistently coming to ninth period, now they can go to the high school gym and have fun for an hour on Wednesday. So we added an incentive to it. Again, the aim is, once we knew the student, how do we make sure they're coming to the ninth period classes, and what incentive we can provide with that as well. We looked at our RTI model because one of the concerns raised was that, okay, if we are having concerns with a kid and I'm a cross-team teacher, how do I have a conversation with the grade level teams that Joe Dhara is not doing well in my class right now? Because right now it is reactive. I get an email and then I respond to it and say, yeah, in my class this is happening. So moving to an electronic platform again makes it much more real time. So the first steps were identifying the students, but after that each of the action steps was directed towards student needs. Is that?
No, that helped a lot because it
Yes.
connected the.
Yeah.
That was good, Joe.
Yeah.
And I'll just frame the elementary part, and Mary and Lisa can, sort of give more detail. But every single student at the elementary level in this economically disadvantaged group that's not passing the English state exam or the math state exam is not reading on grade level on our own measures. So that's something that we've discussed at the curriculum committee level. It's something that we discuss all the time on our leadership team and in schools. But that's essentially kind of the focal point of the entire process for an 8-year-old student or a 9-year-old student or a 10-year-old student taking these tests. They need to be reading on grade level. And so for individual students, that may mean different things. Some, it may be that they're having trouble still decoding words, but a larger majority of the students, it's because they're having trouble comprehending grade level text. And so that being known, and I'm not going to just kind of spend a lot of time repeating myself, but we really strongly feel that the implementing Imagine Learning, which essentially is increasing the amount of sort of student engaging, literacy-focused time in an 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock school day, will really help raise achievement for these students. We really think implementing the literacy framework across all classrooms in the district.
Hey Matt, can I ask you, you said that you'd noticed students weren't comprehending. What was your assessment of why, a group of students weren't comprehending? Like what was happening? Why?
It could be a few different things. It could be vocabulary. It could be that we aren't doing enough of what actually both Mary and Lisa kind of pointed out with more sort of anecdotal examples, but having rich discussion around text. Oftentimes the students who are struggling the most are getting the lowest level questions when they're discussing what they're reading, and that's something that not just we've noticed, but that's something that people have noticed kind of statewide and even countrywide. And that's part of the
that
work
means
with
when in the
Common Core.
Conversation with the adult, the questions are not as
They're not analysis, they're not getting an analysis.
A lot of times a struggling reader would be like, well, what did he do next?
right.
What did he do after he won the race?
So that's a teaching technique that
I mean, I'm oversimplifying,
no,
but that's something that people have seen, not just in Ithaca City School District, but a lot of places. And so when they're speaking to some of these different strategies, we kind of have our district-wide ones that we think are really going to move the needle in the schools, but they also are getting at some specific strategies for their schools. And I think one of the things we didn't talk a lot about is our extension of school learning time for our kids too. Maybe that's something we can quickly.
So essentially, we're focusing on instruction and reflective practitioners because you have a great question. why did this status happen, and how can we serve students better? Because we have the right students. And so when I approach any child at Caroline, I ask them, what are you learning and why are you learning it when I go in the classroom? And if they can't answer those two questions, then that's the first indicator of this child's disengaging. They're not aware of what they're learning or why they're learning it. And so that's very complex. There's a variety of reasons for that. But extending the school day and getting at making learning relevant so that they can answer those questions, so that when they come home at night and if someone asks them, what did you learn? They don't say nothing. Maybe we want them to say something.
Can I ask you a
And
follow-up
so,
question?
absolutely, I just want to finish my thought that the extended day, so we have a huge opportunity at Caroline, I believe at Enfield too, where for the transportation of the school district to work, our students arrive 10 minutes early. It's beautiful. So right now at Caroline, pre-K through first graders get read aloud by 3 literacy specialists, talking about what they're reading and why they're reading it. Second grade works on Imagine Learning. Third grade goes to the music teacher and they listen to a song and they analyze it. Because we want all the students to be treated like the smart students. We want them talking about patterns they see, contrasts they see. Fourth graders go to the art teacher and talk about images and visual literacy, and they actually are incorporating it in their ELA, in their writing.
Hey, Alvin, I'm
Fifth
sorry.
graders
Let me just ask a why question. What makes an adult in the room treat a kid as a smart kid as opposed to a non-smart? Like what happens there?
Because I think if you always have transactional questions, like Matt was saying, what happened next in the story, and not why was the story written and what's the theme of the story, that sets the culture of learning in the classroom. And students will ask these questions of themselves. So it's not just having an adult in the room, but also having the room set up so that students can ask those questions of each other. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I was just trying to get what makes the adult distinguish and say, this student I will ask the more involved question, and this student I will ask what's next.
I think sometimes it's very well intentioned.
Well, I think sometimes it's based on the student's reading level. So a student is reading at a below grade level reading level, and I've been guilty of this as much as anyone. You kind of assume like this is as much as this child can handle. One of the things with Common Core implementation and us trying to use at least one module in grades 3, 4, and 5 is kids are all reading in the close reading strategy, they're all reading, let's say in 5th grade, a portion of the Human Declaration or the Declaration of Human Rights. And so that's something typically that a teacher would be putting in front of the child who's reading 2 or 3 grades below grade level. So that child who's maybe struggling in the comprehension or decoding of text is having the same experience that all the other 5th graders in that class are having in terms of discussing a really complex set of ideas. And so one of the things we've been seeing in Ithaca, and it's been sort of validated in our connections with some districts across the state, are the kids who are kind of getting the most out of these close reading experiences, or everyone's kind of reading a small portion of complex text, are most typically are traditionally like struggling students, like special education students or students who fall in some of these membership groups, because it's like, hey, I can add as much to this conversation as anyone else, just because I may not maybe read as fast as that student next to me or whatever it is. So we feel like putting more of those opportunities and kind of equalizing that opportunity to have those rich discussions and comprehend at that level, we think is just going to kind of raise the bar for everyone and raise that level of achievement for everyone. That's just one aspect of it. And I know, Lisa, you do some pretty powerful after-school things for students at Enfield too that we didn't talk about.
Right, so I can maybe mention two things. I'll talk about after school, but another thing I can mention to you is traditionally what was done is a student took an assessment and didn't do well. Okay, so then all of a sudden we look at this skill. Okay, you don't know your blends, so you need to go with reading teacher to some room in some little group and learn your blends. And when we fix you, you'll come back. And one of the shifts that I'm really trying, and I think we all are, is to not have kids being pulled out. One of the things I found when I went to Enfield 3 years ago is I would have reading teachers and special education teachers running around 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes with this kid, this group, that group. It made absolutely no sense. Kids were spinning, teachers were spinning. So if we really want kids to experience rigorous content, they need to be in the classroom with their peers, experiencing it. And the people with the lenses of expertise, such as reading and special ed teachers, need to be in there with them to scaffold the instruction accordingly, to show or find the way that that kid can excel. Because as Mary said, we have the right kids. They just might need a different way, a different point of access. So that's sort of, when you ask, like when I mentioned the collaborative teaching model, like why did that happen? Well, that's why that happened. And I needed people to slow down and be still and focus on teaching and learning instead of intervention for all of these separate things that really chopped up the kids' day and really made school a very disconnected and disjointed experience. In terms of after school, we also arrived 10 minutes early, but because we're at Enfield, buses can't get out to pick us up until 4:45. So we run enrichment from 2 to 4:45 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we have an academic portion, which we changed this year. Our first 12 sessions, students in grades 3 through 5 are on Imagine Learning for half an hour. And while half of them are, while the other half is reading a high-level text, modeling some of those close reading and rigorous strategies that students are experiencing doing the modules. And the text is about an area, a content area that they will be learning in the future. So for instance, like fourth graders learn about colonial times later on in the year. So right now, our students in Extended Day are reading a novel that sort of will broaden their experience and enrich their experience about colonial times so that when they hit that they're actually going to have some information and knowledge and background about that and sort of be able to share that with their peers. We do that for an hour, and then for the next hour and 15 minutes, it's self-selection into courses of study, which is a very cool thing. The students actually pick a course of study. So we have everything from, we have some book clubs, but we also have like basket making, we have a flag tie, we have people from the community coming in and teaching these crafts. We have basketball, we have cheerleading. So we have all kinds of experiences for kids that they can self-select into. Yeah.
I'll review it. Good.
This is fascinating. I'm learning so much. A couple of comments and questions. I guess we'll sort them out. It does not sound to me like what you're talking about is extraordinary. It sounds like what you're talking about is good. A good way to do this business. Joe, you said you identified students. You identified these students who are in trouble. That can't be rocket science. I mean, not that, I'm sure sometimes systems may prevent us from doing that efficiently, but the thought behind that, clearly you're not saying that this is new and that you discovered this method and that predecessors weren't doing it before this year. Going to families' houses, introducing them to challenging material. Is this magic happening, pixie dust up there, because of the people you are? I mean, really, I'm asking as a real question. I'm not trying to be pejorative. I feel lucky because of the way you're talking. But a part of me, as I'm listening to you, says, what the hell were we doing before? Right? Was this stuff not happening? Is the team now focused on doing this work in this way because you actually have an affinity for the work, you're good at it, and you love kids? What's magic? What's the magic of watching? And a specific question for Matt. So now that the coaching is ongoing, I'm curious about what kinds of things are teachers asking for, if you even try to categorize them. Is it pedagogical? Is it content? Is it classroom management? What's your sense of what the teachers are requesting of you?
Yeah, what's that? You're all looking at me to answer that first question. I think I may have an answer. Oh, yeah. Oh. Please, answer the first question.
You can run the tape again to get the way.
It was a tough one. And the answer, from my perspective, and I'm speaking just for me, isn't a popular one either. I've learned in my time, in almost 15 years doing education, and watching my mother for 40 plus years, everything that has a significant impact on student achievement or is good for kids has some type of implication for an adult. And unfortunately, many adults consider that implication, if it's longer time or more time or additional work, as a negative consequence. I hope that makes some sense to you.
It does.
And that's not a very popular thing to say, especially as a superintendent and having dealt with many educators for a long, long time, to see that play out. For example, they mentioned some things about coming to school 10 minutes early. If you only knew what we're dealing with as far as having those buses show up 10 minutes early, and the adult reactions to that. Some in this room just tonight, when that word was mentioned, it's tough. I mean, whether it's working additional time, paying people for the additional time, with all the things, but we know that's good for kids. We know that additional time, and it has made a significant impact on the families. I've heard from parents how great it is, all those things. But yet, it's tough to do. And we're talking just 10 minutes. So, I mean, I'm not saying that thing, I feel safe in saying it, but it's something that we all need to come to grips with. The things that we're talking about, yes, are common sense, and everything I read now, results now, my schmoke, all the people are talking about changing what we call as education and making a significant impact on student achievement. Talk about the barriers that are in place that are adults, and doing things differently, changing things, all the things that are associated with us doing things that are unpopular, and we all know what makes sense and what works, and the research supports them, but for some reason as educators we can't make it happen. And I'm just saying to you, because of the intended and unintended consequences that we adults face. Just think about it and listen to what's happening about the Common Core, assessments, evaluation, all the conversations out there right now. What's driving their adult consequences and behavior? So I hope that was the answer. I mean, y'all all looking at me to say that. No one wants to do it, so I'll take no chance.
I do have a question about the early morning. You've obviously asked teachers to, I don't know if it's voluntary or whatever, for the 10 minutes. Then do you go for your breakfast so that all the kids are there at that point to go? Okay.
That's a good question. Everyone gets breakfast.
Yeah.
We just start breakfast.
Yeah.
Teachers are compensated for teaching. Okay.
So Enfield, the kids come in, they go ahead and have their breakfast and then go on to whatever activity until the regular school day starts at.
Right. At 7:40, we hit morning walk-up, which means all staff are required to be there. So staff are positioned throughout the school, ready to greet families, greet kids, have those informal conversations, build relationships. We do that until 7:50. Instruction starts at 8.
I did have an open question for Matt about what they're asking for.
I think it's probably a little bit dependent on where people are in their career, but it's certainly seems to be really focused on implementing some sort of new instructional strategy, that a teacher feels will really make a difference with students in his or her classroom, and having this other person help them plan it out in an effective way, and then most times watch them do it, and then get this informal, non-administrative, non-evaluative feedback. So it tends to be very focused on instructional strategies for the most part, not content. And I think that's probably partly based because our coaches were hired more as generalists. Just good, strong teachers of a variety of subject matter. So maybe that's part of the reason. But like I said, we're very pleased with at least the very early results of having a lot of business. Which you were in some of those meetings. We had some worries about putting coaches in every building, and they're just kind of waiting for people to ask them for help, and that has not happened at all. There's waiting lists, which is a problem, but it's, I guess, a better problem, yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, Sean.
I want to thank Seth for asking a couple of those questions, because that's what I was looking for as well in terms of the framing of the local assistance plans. And I still have some questions about the direct connections between what we're finding in data and how we're addressing certain scenarios. And so King at one point in time says that we're really effective at creating programs to solve programs that then solve programs, as opposed to actually just solving what we're trying to solve. And so if I hear you saying things like attendance are an issue, I understand you made attention to mentoring, but then tell me how we're dealing with attendance, or tell me how we're trying to get more folks involved in extracurricular activities. And I'd like to see at some point in time maybe different ways in which some of these targeted enterprises are being implemented. I understand that sort of a rising tide lifts all boats is partly what I heard is about sort of how to change school culture. But historically, we know the certain groups of students that we have not served well. It's been consistent, at least in my 19 years in this community and my study of educational policy the past 100 years, if not more. And part of what I heard this evening as well was a continual focus on the ways in which what we're doing for young folks, which makes complete sense to me. But then part of that also approach makes me worry about sort of always approaching it from a deficit model. And I'm wondering what we are doing as schools to change, right? If young folks have to change, I understand that, we got to do some work with them. But if we're not serving the same types of kids consistently, then what are we doing as school institutions or school buildings to shift our practice, to shift our pedagogies, and maybe even shift the ways in which we might be able to get engagement? It may not be that child's fault that he's not engaged. To Elder's question, and I'll leave it to time for a response in a second. My experience has taught me as both an educator and as a researcher that there is no magic wand to solve these things. It's literally the grind. It's hard work. And so that happens both when we have a consistent vision, but also I dare say when teachers also feel supported. So it's not just that teachers aren't there doing the work, it's also then what kind of resources and tools we give them to be successful in making those things happen. So I'd like to know, or hear at some point in time, what we think is needed to get more teachers on board, to give them the tools that they feel that they need to be able to engage in this kind of work as well. And then lastly, I understand these forums have a particular purpose, right? Like, we love the state, I get it, we talk about it pretty regularly, I understand what these forums are. But what I heard Joe say was not translatable to this sort of forum, right? That the forum is much more generic and I would dare say superficial. It's about checking boxes and filling in boxes, but it's not really about an accurate plan of how to help low-income students be successful. Is it transportation? Is it, right? Or how are we addressing or shifting our pedagogy for students with special needs, right? It's not easily captured in a forum like this, as we know. And I'm sure there's much more dynamic things that you are doing to address those things, but it doesn't come out in this sort of forum. So I'm not sure how best to address that, or how to get maybe a one-sheeter that we can then have some dialogues about afterwards, right? And then lastly, Jason, did I hear you correctly saying that this is something we're supposed to vote on as a board? Is this the idea that the board is supposed to pass these or approve these? And so is that the expectation that will happen this evening?
I think we have until the end of November, which is the next meeting.
Well, I would recommend we do that then, because on my sheet it says it's informational, so I'm reading this as being informational, not that I'm approving a plan in some sort. So my recommendation is that we be a little more clear.
And I would agree, Sean. I was not under the impression we were voting on this item tonight, but we did need to get it on, get the folks here, so we could have sufficient follow-up time.
Is Joe going to put it in this kind of form? Do you have to?
Oh, you have?
Well, we have to put in the information in that, but then, like many of the action steps that we talked about, Ms. Bradwell is correct, it cannot be captured right in the check-in boxes. So there are some pages towards the end where we can put some of our action steps in. So if you look at the last 2 pages, that's probably where you will see a lot of the things we're talking about. Because for the first couple of pages, it is simply rating yourself on each of the tenets. And, that doesn't capture the heart of what we're trying to do.
And let me go back to the point that I thought Seth was trying to make as well, is that even while we're listing these things in terms of the strategy we're doing, what's missing for me is the connection about why we think that's going to make a difference, or how we got to even think that that may be the possible solution to move the data, to move the needle, or to have students have better positive experiences in our schools. And I don't know, again, how it's the best way to communicate that, but I would need that connection about we're doing this because we think this will then do this, right? That's sort of thing.
And we talk about data, but the data's been consistent for years. It's really kind of same groups. And we're a high-performing district, but we have groups that are not able to take advantage of that. So how do we make that happen? And so we're hearing a lot of good things tonight. But appreciate Seth bringing up the questions. I'll just, Sean had excellent points. I'll just go back to just a specific, Joe, you're talking about Saturday school. What does Saturday school look like?
So Saturday school is run on Saturdays. And so what we do is...
I'm hoping it ain't Sunday, maybe.
So what we do is...
I wouldn't know when to show up.
So basically it is
That's a really good place to start, Joe.
It's another way of extending the school day and learning and academics for our students, right? So 9th period and Saturday school, they're both synonymous in a way to extend the learning opportunities for our students. So again, it comes down to the hard work, as you mentioned, of not just figuring out, okay, who are the students who we would like to attend, but actually making the phone calls to the parents, making sure that they're aware of this opportunity, making sure that they are on the same page with the teachers, making sure that transportation is arranged. So there are a lot of nuts and bolts that go into running Saturday school or 9th period. The aim is to extend the learning opportunity for the kids, so that by getting these extra opportunities, it should tie into clarifying a concept which was not clear before in class, learning through pre-teaching some concepts that are going to be taught next. And these are the opportunities that we had it before. But it does take a lot of work every year because we have to make sure we do the work of contacting the families. So academically, it is an extension of the school. So you got math, English, social studies, science, you got an extension of the school. But it is different because it is on the weekend, and it does take a lot of work to get kids there on the weekend.
We're talking 2 or 3 hours, or what,
Yes.
Saturday morning?
Yes.
So that all makes sense, right? It's phenomenal. And if we look at some of the data, right, KIPP schools are making kids go to school for 10 hours a day and on weekends and all that, right? But again, if we're looking at a deficit model approach, more of the same is not going to give you different results. So I'm wondering the ways in which we may be engaging 9th period or Saturday period that doesn't just simply replicate the same field results that we've been getting during the regular
Monday
school
through
day.
Friday.
Right, and so I don't know if there's a response to that now, or if that's something that's in plan or be thinking about. But if I'm a student who's disengaged and you make me come in on a Saturday, I'm going to be more disengaged if you're giving me more of the same. Right? I want to see cartoons. I don't want to see additional problem sets. That's all I'm going to be doing. And I'm not sure. And I've actually participated when Jason was running these Saturday academies. Definitely we'll call it at that point in time, right? That the community came in to help support and be tutors for that. And so I've participated in those. So those I've seen, but I don't know what the model is right now.
How do you get away from the idea of it being punishment instead of?
Well, see, and that's where it becomes important to be responsive to what the student needs. So in other words, you don't go in with a lesson plan for 9th period that this is what I'm going to teach to the students. It's more along the lines of, okay, so what were you learning through the day, and what are the questions you have. Let's look at the assignments that you have. Let's respond to what you were having difficulty understanding so that we can resolve that. So it is not like I'm going in with a lesson plan. It's a responsive model of teaching the kids. And that's what makes it a little more interesting, because now actually the kids' voices are being heard in terms of, okay, I don't have to finish this assignment because I'm in ninth grade. It's more like, now I can ask a question. I can clarify a concept. We also added incentives. For example, every other Wednesday, the kids can go and play at the Ithaca High School gym. You know, that is an extra incentive to increase attendance. We're not trying to do more of the same. And that is why the way it is run is by making it responsive to the kids' needs in terms of, okay, we're not having a unit plan for this many ninth periods and then break it down into lesson plans for each ninth period. It is more about, okay, what did the kid have a question with? And it may be the same question goes for 3 ninth periods, but that's the way it is. You know, so to help the kid with what they actually need, as opposed to this is what we have to cover.
They're also feeding them. And a nice partnership with the Ithaca College athletic teams.
Oh.
And so each student would typically have 2 or 3 baseball players or 2 or 3 women's basketball players, and kids have a neat connection there. And it's incentivized.
Go ahead, Chris.
I guess to piggyback off of what Sean said, and actually Seth and I were talking, what are we doing differently? And I look at it like losing weight. I need to lose weight. And I can go to the gym, and if I don't add cardio and eat less, it's not going to change my weight. So what are we doing differently with these kids to increase their grades? Because if we're going to go back and extend the day, what are we doing differently when they're there to make them accomplish the goal? I guess is a question Sean is asking. And I think that's what, so we've identified the group, we know the objective. What's the difference that's going to move the needle and make that difference to get that objective? That's what I guess the question is going. So when they get in Saturday Academy or that extended, what are we doing differently that's going to move them forward? Is the classroom setting different? Is the approach different? What's the nuts and bolts when they get there?
And well, go ahead. I'm not sure there's an answer to that, but go ahead.
I can speak a little bit for Enfield.
Sure.
I mean, for extended day at Enfield, when I first came, it was homework club.
Sure.
It was more of the same. We're not doing homework during extended day. So, my first year there, we tried project-based learning, which had a lot of, the kids really liked it. But then, this year, I sat down and had a serious talk with the teachers, and they're like, project-based learning, Lisa, is great, but, we're really wrestling with raising the rigor. And we want the kids to be reading, complex texts. And, we're talking about our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders who are in trouble. So I said, okay, well, how are we going to get the most bang for our buck in this 1 hour, twice a week? And when you add that up, it's about 36 extra hours of instruction. It's not as much as you think. So we had to think about, who do we target? Okay, because not every kid is going to benefit from 36 extra hours of instruction. So we had some really serious conversation around who is that cohort, and then what do we do? Well, our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders were not on Imagine Learning at Enfield. We started with K through 2. So the first thing we said is, we want a ratio of about, 10 kids to 1 teacher. Okay, so if we put half of those kids on Imagine Learning, which is 5, then I have 5 kids that I can work intensively with, reading high-level text, engaging them in some of those close reading strategies, getting them excited about reading, getting them talking more chances to talk, more discussion, more developing language. And my teacher said, you do that for 12 weeks with this cohort of kids, then there's a possibility we're going to move some of those kids. So if that helps answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Helps me. I can't speak for
Did
everybody
you
else.
handpick the kids to come? or anybody who wants to can come?
We, first of all, went through the list and identified kids who we thought would be would be most successful in that kind of setting. And, you know, we had full house. So we got great response. So we had only so many teachers, but we were, you know, who are available to teach the extended day, and we really wanted to limit that size, and all of our classes are full. So we have about 60 kids.
So I don't want to keep everyone here too late, but I just got to say I deal with Dr. Brown a lot with his slogans, and some of them are okay and some of them are not. But I just want to say one of the best things I've heard tonight, and I don't remember who said it, but one of you said, and it's, we have the right kids. And that statement alone was, you know, we have the right kids. This is our group of kids that you know, we're not changing them, we're not fixing them, you know, this, and now is just a beautiful expression of what we're all kind of on this mission for. We have the right kids, and we'll make this work. So that was, I like how you said that.
That's saying that none of my slogans are beautiful?
No. No, that's not what I'm like.
Not as beautiful. I was going to ask another question, but that was a very nice place to end, I think. But we'll have an opportunity to review LAPs, but we do have to approve or not approve.
We'll be a little bit late getting them up. They need to be on our website. The state needs them approved by the board. I think the deadline is November 22nd, but I'm just wondering what would happen if we missed one of their deadlines. I think
Well, could always take us to court.
We could agree to meet as many deadlines as they meet.
Don't get Brad started on your
Let's put this agenda number 26 and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. I will just, my last question. Does DeWitt have a Saturday school?
They have extended day on the weekday. I do not believe they have Saturdays.
I'm going back to opening up the gym for dances, increases 30 or 40 more kids come. That's been done at DeWitt for probably 15 years. So if Saturday school turns out to be done very, very well at Point, we would hope, and we know that there's a lot more collaboration between the middle schools than there used to be. So that shouldn't be a new idea for DeWitt in the next few years.
We've been able to do that with the private donation that was given to Boyden for the night period.
Yeah.
And so we're enhancing that, calling it extending the day, and then being able to have a budget neutral piece for the Saturday school.
Yeah, we were kind of wondering where the funding was coming. I think we do recall that there was a
that's where that comes from.
Just to make that clear. That we are not funding something at Boynton, or we are not funding at DeWitt. But it is an opportunity for Boynton, and so we appreciate that. We appreciate the donation. We're gonna let you guys go back to your real lives, and but we appreciate the opportunity to hear from you all.
Real life.
No, thank you very much.
Drive carefully. Do you really have a warrant? Because I don't have a warrant. I do not think it'll be flattering.
Okay, we're switching T-shirts. That's great. Feel free to.
I don't want those up.
We're gonna keep pushing through. Are we good?
Extra large.
Are we good?
Got a large. I could go for a meeting.
So we're going to continue, and the second item is the public hearing on the New Routes Charter School reactions and response. The Wednesday after our last meeting, we did have our obligatory meeting, public hearing regarding the New Routes Charter. We as a district have an opportunity to respond. There are certainly responses from the community, from others that are going to Albany and SUNY and the Charter School Institute. but most of us were here that night, and certainly we have, over the last 4 or 5 years, have had a lot of input from the community, and certainly we've had the opportunity to observe what goes on in New Routes. We are the home school for this charter school, and we certainly have an opportunity to provide input to CSI if we wish, either as a group or individually. So did at least want to put it out there, and I need to at least need some consensus from the board about where do you want to go as far as a response.
I would like to respond hopefully as a total group, but I understand if there are board members that can't or feel that they can't support certain questions that I may have about New Routes in a letter. I feel it would be better coming from a group rather than singly, but I'll do it singly if we can.
Very good. Others? Pat?
I have some very, very serious concerns about the integrity of the data that was presented to the state of New York. And as an elected representative, as a taxpayer, as a school board member, as a community member, I consider this to be a significant ethical issue. This is no reflection on the many parents, students, and teachers who came to speak on behalf of New Routes last week, because what was very clear to me during that hearing is that those people had, I think, no idea what was in the report that their principal and superintendent of that small group of students submitted to the state. There are serious discrepancies in the data. There are puzzling and disturbing references to Nottingham High School, which don't belong there at all. And there are serious mismatches between what that school has presented to New York State every year versus what they're presenting in that report. I think these questions need to be raised. I don't have any illusions about the effect it will have on the Charter Schools Institute. I don't think anyone wants to read that report carefully. I don't think anyone in Albany really cares about issues of quality and honesty, but I do, as a human being. I'm very disturbed by what I saw in that report.
Go ahead, Brett.
I won't repeat what Pat had to say. I'll just say I agree with that. And I had kind of a more global, you asked for a reaction to it, kind of a more global one having to do with charter schools and the process in general. The objective, as I understood the Charter Schools Institute, was to try out new theories, new ways of teaching, new ways of reaching children. And nationally, what we've seen is, in round numbers, 20% do better than the homeschool, 50 do about the same, and 30% actually do worse. And clearly we have here one that's in the 30%. That's a failed school. And the objective of the charter school law was not to create permanent institutions. It was to experiment and move on. I think in this case, we've seen that whatever the experiment is, and that doesn't come out in their application at all, what new teaching methods they have or whatever is not highlighted at all. There's nothing there, and maybe there is nothing new there, I don't know. But it isn't part of their application. It isn't something they're speaking to. And I think the challenge for the Charter Schools Institute is to say this is a failed school and it's time to move on and let this one disappear. Maybe another one will appear in another couple of years, maybe not. I don't know. But that was the original idea behind charters, and I don't support creating a permanent institution when we know they're not doing as well as their home school district. And so I would be for us speaking against the renewal of that charter.
I have tried to advocate, at least for the space, for an alternative almost since the beginning, because I'm a fan of kids, and the more alternatives we give to little people, the more you're going to hear me celebrate, despite all the things we're doing as the home district to actually improve the outcomes of the kids. All kids are not created the same. That being said, when Pat and others have come to the table to criticize the data, and they responded with the beautiful children and their stories, I was really just hoping that would get us to this day, this day where the administration had a chance to actually advocate for their position. And I will be completely honest, what I saw last week was not just unexpected, it was actually a little sad that at the moment where the principals of the institution have a chance to represent themselves and their value add, they once again put the kids in front of us. That was duplicative, it was unfortunate, it angered me, and I'll get over it and we'll move on. To Brad's point, one of the things they could have said and they could have proven in the same way that the nine of us would demand that he would prove is that the school deserves to exist because they're taking children who may be here and getting them here, as opposed to maybe our larger expectations as we take kids here and we get them here. It doesn't matter to me how far we move kids, as long as we have options to move kids. Having been the caretaker of a child who came home once and said to me, if you send me back to that school, meaning our high school, I will kill myself. I have to take this seriously. Since that day, I've always taken this seriously because I know he was dead serious. Because of the way his identity was dismissed, the way his thought pattern was disregarded, and the way he was always made the subject of everything negative in Ithaca High School. Kids are experiencing that throughout schools, no matter how much we try to shine them up. Given there was a child at New Roots who actually decided to take his own life, that raises questions as well. All of which I thought would be addressed by the concerned, conscientious adults at the table. And the fact that I did not get to see that, I just can't tell you how much that disappoints me. That school has a history. We know they were dumped on. Initially, everyone sent the students who were ill-performing, the students with the greatest needs, right? And some of the students who we thought we couldn't meet their needs because they were so superior. New Roots experienced all of that the first year. They shook that out. Second year, probably experienced the same wave from surrounding districts. They have a history. They had something to share with us. I would suspect the Charter School Institute would have paid attention to the fact that they whiffed on an opportunity to, as adults, represent what's been happening, positive or negative. So now I'm left with more stories of children. And again, that was an unfortunate way to play that hand.
I think my greatest concern is that we can't say how they are doing. How well are they doing or how well they're not doing? We truly don't know because we're not sure of the quality of the data we're given. That's where I struggle because I believe that we should be able to look at this and say, okay, this is how they're performing, and I don't feel comfortable. I don't think we can say that.
Other comments? Certainly for me, it's it's obvious that well, they say that they serve 19 districts. It's obvious to me that there's 18 districts out there that have no alternative middle and high school as we do, lack alternatives for the kids, and New Roots certainly is an option. Yeah, I certainly feel that the kids from our district are much better served if they go to LACS. There's some, certainly community school is a great option for those that truly need a really small classroom environment. We have multiple options, as we've said in the past, for kids in our district being really our prime concern is the kids in this district. There's, we have made physical improvements to LACS, really able now to handle more children, more opportunities for kids to come in at a later date. Certainly that is on us, and that is to ensure that our alternatives are truly the first choice and where the kids go. But there's a charter school, so some kids have the opportunity to go there. Whether that's the best option for them, I can't say that as long as there's a charter school here. But we've always took it as a challenge if we were going to be the first small city district to have a charter school located here with us, that we would have to ensure that our programs, our practices met the needs of all our kids, and took it as a challenge, took it as one more challenge that we need to meet. The idea that New Roots is going to be a dumping ground for kids that we did not want in this district is what's the word I'm looking for? Just that's not what it can be. Or should be, because those children are going to be served there, because I feel, and I can't say we, I feel that those kids will be better served in certainly LACS or frankly Ithaca High School, or what are we not doing to serve those kids? It's more a question, not whether New Roots exist or not. But as an entity, I would agree certainly with the numbers that have been presented, the data that comes from New Roots back to the state, as far as I can tell, is unreliable. But I would certainly sign off on any letter stating that perhaps New Roots needs to be located in different districts.
You talked specifically about Ithaca children. I, as a resident and board member here, think all the children at New Roots belong to us because we are the home district. So, what doesn't fit Ithaca children doesn't fit the other children either. And I think New Roots does a disservice to many children.
I don't think I share my fellow board members' perspective, and I'm not sure if that's on the efficacy of the school or not. The data that I understand that Dr. Brown and Jason Trumbull presented to us with their numbers seem to indicate that New Roots had a graduation rate of 74% for its cohort. Now we can debate those numbers. The way in which I think about that is the 38 students that we've sent there. That is a pretty, that's not the goal. The goal is always for me 100% graduation rate. But like Eldred, I have a hard time separating my own personal experience from raising our daughter in the high school, who would come home repeatedly and talk about how the school wasn't for her. And I would tell teachers as I do workshops about how we had to put our daughter back together at the dinner table every evening after her experiences. And so having an alternative for her was a wise thing. And someone who's, I mentioned King a lot, but someone says King always says that a democratic education has multiple doors. And so for me, the issue may not be to close New Roots, but to actually try to do some work to improve their efficacy, because it does serve a particular population of students that we don't serve. And we just had a presentation about the consistent kinds of students that we don't serve well historically. And I'm not saying that New Roots is going to do the job that does that better, but I'm interested interested in the possibility of having multiple doors for young folks to find their education. And if they are graduating a particular cohort at 74% and we're graduating at 54%, then for me it wouldn't be a failed school. It may not be the best school, but I think there's some options and opportunities out there. So I understand what I love about the board is that, you know, it's a democratic enterprise and we have multiple, you know, opinions and perspectives. But a letter to the CSI, depending on how it's written, if it's making those kinds of comments and accusations is not something that I'd be able to support.
Go ahead, Jim.
So, I don't think there's a lot that we can do. We've been down this road when the school was initially chartered, and so in my own mind, I'm trying to think of what we can do, what might be effective. I agree with what everyone has said, including Sean. And you know, the state controller comes around and audits the schools, and I just see, the thing that bothers me is that this school seems to run without having an audit, without, you know, somebody in Albany's reviewing it. We're the home district. We don't have any power. We don't have any oversight. I don't know who has oversight. And if it's a charter school institute, I don't think that they're exercising any particular oversight. The data is questionable. So to begin to talk about things, you're already. So anyway, I would offer a different suggestion. We've in the past sent letters of our own. That's what we've done. Maybe people are new on the board, but we did personally send letters in the past. But I'd like to invite, for what it's worth, this Susan Miller Barker to come. She's the executive director. And I mentioned that to Brad. Brad said she won't come. Well, I'd like to give her the invitation to come and address the local home district of this school. I think that they have she may turn us down. I think that would be improper. I think that it's her job to, maybe I'm wrong, but I would think it's her job to go out and meet with the public. They did initially when the school started come out, and I think that they don't enjoy it. I was there, and they get tough questions, and I think it's important. I think it's too easy for these people to sit where they are and just look at the paperwork and make their decisions. If they turn us down, so be it. But I'd like to make that invitation that they come in and we have a forum, a discussion with them.
Jay bring up a good point, and it really flows into what Sean says. We would frankly like to be able to work with New Roots to meet the needs of a cohort of kids. If that's a good solution for you, then how can we make it better? But you know, we have $1 million going there, $1 million plus, and really no input, no idea what the curriculum or really, you know, how the kids are being served when they're there. Sometimes some of our students will come back, and that happens fairly often. But it's okay for students to try out different ideas, different ways of learning. I mean, that's all. That's liberal education. There's a foundation for that. But I think that's part of the frustration is that we pay a lot of money, but there's no input. There's really no feedback. We really have. I think that's really the frustration, and it's not the frustration with the kids. We certainly, the kids come and they very sincerely talk about their experiences at New Roots, and that's why they have them come and speak, and not the principal or the superintendent or the board of directors or anyone else of New Roots that has to basically be accountable, but they're not accountable to the public, frankly, and it's. Or to the taxpayers, or frankly back to the districts from which those children came. So again, where are we, Brad? 10-7.
Let me try to suggest that what we do is that we ask the superintendent to communicate with what's her name, Ms. Barker, that we'd like the application for renewal of New Roots held in advance until she's had an opportunity to come speak directly with the community here and to answer thoroughly the formal complaints that have been filed against the school as well, so that there aren't things hanging in the air as part of an approval or a disapproval.
And Seth, that over?
No, since Brad put something on the table, I was just going to suggest us to get to action step. So.
Oh, I'll second that. I think that's a nice idea.
It's been seconded. Elder, do
I would just add a clause to the end of Brad's statement and say, and, force is not the right word, we deserve an accounting from the principals of that school. Not avatars, not the folks at CSI. We have a superintendent. He can speak more clearly about the extent to which we hold his small feet to the fire, but we deserve a reckoning from the principal of that institution.
I'll accept it as a friendly amendment, except the comment about the small
We should not muddy the water.
Well, at some point, we need to put in there about the reconciliation of the numbers.
That's why I've said part of. That's why I've suggested the broad scope and leave it to the superintendent to send it.
Good.
Brad, why do you want the superintendent to do it instead of the board?
He's the.
Well, he could do it, but
Can be signed by both if you.
Yeah, that's
prefer.
it. So, but I mean, I think the board needs to be directing the superintendent to make that contact. But it's at the board's. He would be doing it at the board's.
I guess that's why I said
request.
resolution.
Yes.
I propose that he send that.
So I'm just clarifying. It's not the superintendent asking for Susan Miller Barker.
It's the board. It's the board.
of Board of Education.
Yeah, it's the board. No, I'm asking that it be a resolution of this board that he make that request. And with the caveat, I'm suggesting that we suggest to them that they hold the application in advance, so they've had the opportunity to have a public forum here. And I think, there are some complaints hanging on, that haven't been answered from back months ago, and I think they deserve to answer those. Again, it's part of CSI's ignoring the public.
I fully support that. I think it's a great idea. A little bit of real dialogue as opposed to this foolishness of back and forth would be helpful with multiple parties. And if we don't get anywhere, then we'll have our answer then. We may already have our answer, but we would definitely have it then. And I would ask not to put more work on our folks, but I'm curious about the breakdown of the demographics of the folks that we also have been sending to New Roots. So it's one thing to have 38 students, but I'd like to know a little bit more information about who are those 38 students. Is there a particular type of student that is constantly feeling that that's a school for them or not? And I imagine it's not hard to this. I imagine this information is not hard to get compared to only 38 students. It's fantastic. So I'd like to see that at some point. It's not connected to the proposal.
38 students weren't all ours. Those are just the ones that graduated that year. Those 38 students were not all ICSD students. I don't even know how many were in the ICSD of that cohort.
We should have any of that data anyway, so whatever it is.
It just, unfortunately may get to be so small a cohort.
Yeah, we can't.
To Sean's point, it was interesting. Sean, you were not at you unfortunately had to miss the hearing, but a young lady she was actually the last student speaker. Came up and prefaced her remarks by saying, I'm not your typical New Roots student. And so, which led me to ask, but we were not asking questions, not engaging in dialogues. And the obvious question in my mind, okay, so what is the typical New Roots student? But she made it clear that she was not a typical New Roots student. So perhaps it would be good to at least have some information about what the typical New Roots student is and what they need. There's a resolution motion on the table. Folks have spoken to it. All in favor? that's going to be everyone. At least we're gonna punt on a response letter immediately. But I think that's frankly a pretty good place to be.
So just a
Go ahead.
question, if that can be,
Yeah, we're
can we
done.
see that request before it goes out, is what I'm asking? I know it's already, the resolution's already been voted on, right, but I'd like to see the wording of it as it goes out. I won't wordsmith, I just want to see it.
Oh, right. Oh,
Come on.
We all thought about that.
Sean was holding up his domestic rules of order. I'm not sure why. I feel maybe I think that's a signal now.
Rules of order.
But so once again, we spent enough time on the routes. We do have a few policies if we can finish it up, and we're gonna power through. Otherwise, we'll lose our crowd.
There's only three, you want me to go?
No, yeah, please.
There's 3 policies on the 3000 series, and then actually this would complete the 3000 series, so.
Oh, we're just so happy.
You don't even know.
Before Thanksgiving, I mean, it is a wonderful.
Don't jinx us, Rob.
No.
The first policy is policy 3000, and these are all for a second reading and adoption. So I move policy 3000, goals and objectives for administration, for a second reading and adoption this evening.
Second.
Second by Judy, and it's not real long, so it's all there. Any changes, Sean, from the first reading?
Do we have that information? I don't believe so, right?
What?
There weren't changes to this one.
Okay, so but Jay has a question.
So Sean,
Yes.
on all these policies, maybe you can help me again. This one is a local.
Yeah.
It's not required, and I think maybe the other ones as well. Not required. Did you get some direction? Why even have it?
So we did something what NISBA asked us not to do, is they gave us a recommended series and told us that we should just look at what they gave us. And what we did was go back and look at what we had, even though we were instructed not to, and then look at what they thought we needed. So I think when we got this originally, that there was 5 policies in the 3000 they wanted us to do, and we ended up going with 3. We had some conversation at the policy committee meeting that, and NISBA's recommendation as well, that it would be good to have some indication to the greater community if they're going to look at what the board thinks should be the goals and objectives for the administration. So the idea is simply it's a communication tool to the greater community about the way in which the board would be framing some of this, and we tried to write it in a way that was broad but still specific, if we can say that kind of thing.
Yes, concise, I would say.
Yeah, great point. And so that was the idea, and it was simply to sort of cover some of the basics. It was not meant to be exhaustive, but to give some sort of hint or nod to the community about what we're expecting for our administration to do.
I can endorse it.
We good? Move seconded, all in favor. That will be everyone but Brad who stepped out.
I move policy 3100, superintendent of schools, for a second reading and adoption this evening.
Second. Wait, Chris.
This is also not a large policy. There was not, I don't believe there was a change in here either. I'm looking real quick.
This is the one that,
Oh, right. We did have, the conversation that we had was highlighted in the 3rd paragraph was that the superintendent will be responsible for delivering an annual, for lack of a better word, state of the district address. So earlier in our policy book, we say that superintendent is responsible for continually updating the board of district progress and the district, the running of the district. And here we formalize it by saying that there should be some annual report, presentation to not just the board but to the community about the state and the status of the Ithaca City School District.
That would be new, is that correct?
I seem to think it's someplace buried in other policies, but
It's buried, it's in there now, but it's kind of...
Okay.
the superintendent is currently required to update the board on an annual basis, but is not necessarily responsible for giving a presentation or state of the district address. So there is some accountability from the superintendent every year, but not sort of a public presentation.
So how do you foresee this playing out?
That we would have an evening where it literally be the state of the district. and the superintendent would use that. And I think we're having a conversation with Lavelle, trying to be mindful that Dr. Brown is not always going to be the superintendent, but Dr. Brown was saying that there actually be a real opportunity to talk about some of the work that we're doing, and it'd be different. The way in which it happens currently, we had the conversation, is the convocation. But the convocation is during the day, and not everyone can attend, even while it's filmed. And wouldn't it be good if we actually had the same sort of idea for community? Right, so there'd be convocation for teachers, and then sort of a public format to present the similar information. State of the district.
So you could just tweet out something. School started. Everything's good.
That's right. Do some scheduling.
They're really short. Yeah.
Hey, can I just, on the second paragraph, it says the last sentence, second to last line, and the sole responsibility for its effective functioning. Isn't that contrary to everything we've been preaching about teamwork and what do you call, why would we say that the superintendent, that role has sole responsibility for the effective functioning? That we want teachers, we don't want sole, we want soul. I mean, you can have soul, huh?
In the end,
there is no end. I mean, how do you say soul? You say responsibility.
The buck stops with them.
Should we say ultimate as opposed to soul?
Ultimate.
As in, no matter what other people do within the district, there is someone in charge.
And I think part of this came from, we debated some of this language as well, that the other phrasing was awkward about it was like the premier leader of the entire galaxy.
Supreme leader. We like supreme leader.
We decided to change that, but I like the recommendation of taking soul out. I understand that throughout the entire thing we're talking about collaborative idea, and I like the idea of either ultimate or something like that.
Okay,
makes sense.
Ultimate grant.
Go with ultimate.
Final.
You almost mean, do you mean in a sense that he has the legal responsibility?
In part, yes.
In multiple meetings there.
But I don't like
legally,
soul.
ethical.
Sure. But I don't know about ultimate.
Sure.
Final.
Final's okay.
Final solution.
I'm stuck on the superintendent has that role and that position has the ultimate authority, or they have the authority, but how do you?
That means
but how do you say that role has the sole responsibility for its effective functioning? That's kind of, I mean, we can say you have the authority to make, the buck stops with you, you make the final decision, but you certainly don't have the sole responsibility for its effective functioning. We have part of that responsibility. Teachers do, students, families. I mean, it's the...
Right, so we could just cut that second part of that sentence altogether and just say the superintendent has executive authority over the school system. That was the phrase we debated the most at the policy meeting, but
Or could we take out soul and just say and responsibility for its effective functioning? I mean,
because he would then have executive authority
and responsibility.
We want to define executive authority too, because I don't approve any staff, make recommendations. So unless I was making the approving staff appointments, I'm really not one of the ultimate authority either. Like the Maryland superintendents, like some other state superintendents, they can hire and fire, which I can't.
Well, it starts with, in accordance with the policy of the board, the laws of New York State.
And that was straight NISBA's boilerplate language. We ended up going back to
So you have sort of had.
We give you all authority except the stuff you can't do.
That far back. Maybe I can't do all that stuff.
Yes, I'd recommend that we get rid of everything after system.
Yeah.
That's good.
Executive authority will be consistent with state regs, right?
That's at the beginning, yeah.
Because they're going to define that. Right.
Okay, you're catching that.
Still have a problem that the buck stops with him.
We know that. It's because he's the only one the commissioner can really go after.
Yeah, right. That's right.
I mean, truthfully, he's the only one. superintendent's the only one that the commissioner can punish, can actually go after. I mean, what's the worst they can do to us as custodian of the board?
Yeah.
I mean,
We can be
we've all admitted that wouldn't be all bad sometimes.
Make my day, make my day. Right, that's the old thing. So anyway, it's everything. But executive authority obviously covers broad. And that's why policies and laws are written in that way.
It is narrowed by the preceding, the first part of that sentence.
Exactly. Sounds good. With and the sole responsibility for effective functioning is deleted. Correct? Okay. All right. Anything else? All in favor? That's everyone, and Brad is here. And the last one.
I move policy 3120, duties of the superintendent, for a second reading and adoption this evening.
Second.
And this policy, we did change from the first reading. What we did was go through, again, the superintendent's contract and try to, with some conversations with Dr. Brown, to have some conversations about the actual role of the job and align that with what the contract said their stated responsibilities were. And so that's what we have here. It's a little longer than what you sent to us. We added some things back that we thought were important to be able to communicate to the community about personnel, about leadership, and about financial management, but everything else remains the same. We did have a couple conversations about the personal qualities and growth.
Oh, God, that was ours.
So you kept in the humility thing.
We did keep the humility in despite, present circumstances.
As we have said over and over again, these policies are not written for any particular person who may be in office right now.
Well, I think this
You
one
could get
is-
somebody in who actually feels quite highly about themselves.
All in love, all in love.
Sean Jay's got a question.
Yes, Jay.
Well, why is notice checked at the top? What's that?
There's this book says there are three things, right? The policy that's required, a policy is just sort of a local policy, and a policy that gives notice. And so the idea of this is that it's not necessarily a policy per se that governs practice, but it's just giving notice to the community about what we expect.
It's 2 steps below required.
Thanks, Pete.
Which is almost.
It doesn't even matter. It's pretty optional.
It is very optional. Absolutely, it's very optional.
The previous policy also had.
It did. I didn't ask that.
Yeah.
Local is optional too.
Yes.
So we're good. Go ahead, Jay.
Just out of curiosity, in the personnel area, the last bullet, make personnel transfers that support the district mission and vision. Make personnel transfers. I don't know. What is that in reference to? Transfers?
The superintendent currently has the authority to transfer staff between buildings.
Right.
And so we've all experienced that on our, well, many of us experienced that on our time on the board, where that's taking place, where a principal's been transferred or teacher's been transferred. And so the reason why it was phrased that way is to make those, to try to push those transfers that would only be done in support of the district mission or vision.
Not arbitrarily
or
punishment.
Right.
Yeah.
Retribution, those kind of things.
Should we change transfers to decisions? Why
Well, I think we're
focus on
specifically talking
transfers?
about transfers. I mean, that was the idea behind it.
I mean, why? There's all type of decisions of
Because one of the things that comes up repeatedly about, and there's a number of things about, there's other things up above about personnel decisions. But one of the key sticking points that have been in this community has been when folks get transferred between buildings against.
So,
Right.
You put that in deliberately.
Well,
it's always been
it's
there.
been there. So it's not we put it in deliberately. We did have a deliberate conversation about it, but it is in the contract as well.
Consistent with the contract.
It's in the contract.
That the superintendent has the authority to make any and all transfers of personnel. And what we added was that support district mission and vision.
So why not just put that up on the 3rd bullet? Instead of making a new one.
Make recommendations, etc.
It could be put up there.
He can transfer,
That support
dismiss in accordance with the policies of the board and the mission and vision.
I think we can do what we want to do. I think there is something specific in particular about transfers that needs to be addressed. So it's not just personnel decisions, it's also when we decide to transfer folk.
And we want this in here because we want to put people on notice or something? Like what?
Because the policy is not always written just for the superintendent or the board. The policy is written for all employees of the city school district. So what's one of the ways in which you offer any bit of good faith to principals, to teachers aides, that they're not just going to be moved arbitrarily?
So I'm using this as, hey, my transfer didn't match the mission and vision, therefore it was wrong, and I'm going to raise it at my next hearing.
Okay, you have to do that with almost every one of our policies. We talk about how we're making decisions within the district mission and vision, how we're doing technology decisions, right? So I hear what you're saying, and we can do that with a bunch of policies, but we have that language pretty consistently throughout our policy book. But I'm not the lawyer trying to, sue people for.
Well, if I'm looking at this thing, I'm thinking.
It could be a cause of action, couldn't it?
I don't know that it strengthens it, but it's something I can hang my hat on.
So, see, Seth, could I say the same thing about the first bullet, that you didn't create a structure that encouraged and enhanced my effectiveness for all district employees, so therefore I have a case there? I mean, the reality is any of this language can be used, and you got to make the argument, make the case. And what we're trying to communicate to the community is that we're not going to do these things arbitrarily and capriciously.
What's so special? What's so special about transfers? Why would we give the expectation that transfers is something that should never happen? You should never move from BJ.
That's not the way in which I read it. What I read it is that if you are transferred, then you should have faith to know that that transfer was done to support the district mission and vision.
Okay.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you have that faith? Like, we're just transferring you for any reason? Or?
Yeah, it's capricious.
It's stronger here than it is in some of our contracts. I wish Bob was in here, and maybe I would speak to this. When it speaks about transferring teachers, for example, does it speak to giving a reason why? I think it's just the superintendent has authority, or whatever the word is, to transfer. So we may be taking an additional step here that's not that it's not consistent with contract, but it's harsher language or tougher.
I am now in rereading, looking at bulleted point 3, wondering whether, appointment, promotion, transfer, or dismissal in accordance with the policies of the board and the procedures outlined with the law, by the law, whether that doesn't effectively cover bulleted point 5 without making it as explicit and potentially divisive. That you're already making, recommendations to the board for transfer that have to fit board policy and the law.
Mission vision is
Well, in the contract, and I'm not that familiar, if you recommend a transfer, is it board policy we have to approve that? Or can you do it?
all transfers for all personnel.
It's going to be on the personnel report for everyone. Certainly challenge the personnel report.
You wouldn't see it as an involuntary transfer. It would just show up in the list of all the other things, so you wouldn't know if
As an involuntary transfer, yes, it will show up on the list as a transfer and the reason why.
Right, exactly.
There may be a lot of transfers, so not very few, but you'll see the reason why.
So I think those are all good arguments. And part of the reason why I actually like policy is thinking about the ways in which people come at it from different perspectives. So I understand we're approaching it from a board and from a superintendent perspective, right? But I'm also thinking about it, if I'm an employee and I'm reading this, what am I looking for? And so I think there's multiple ways in which to look at any of these. And so I'm fine whatever way we go, but for me, I don't see as much of a problem with this because I'd want to have faith that know that what my district is doing is in the best interest of young folk. It is not about personality. And we can say what we want to say, but there's been a history in this district of moving folks around about personality.
Yeah.
So if you were to delete that final bullet point, I think that it's addressed in the third one and also in the first. Create structures that encourage and enhance the effectiveness of all district employees. I think that that you could use that first bullet point as an argument of why you might transfer someone, because you're thinking that that's a structure and it enhances the effectiveness. So in a sense, it's in there. It could be argued. it's more explicit to have it there, but I can see
I
reasons
just
not
think
to have it.
given the history,
I'll say, if folks are that strong, let's make a resolution to have it removed.
Sure. Can I ask the question slightly differently? I too remember conversations about people being banished to Enfield and Caroline. 3 stops on a New York City subway station. However, it was discussed as if they were falling off the face of the earth. I never really understood that. But I do understand the culture was to punish people. At least that's how it seemed to come across to the teachers who had to go to these places. We are taking a different approach, right? It really doesn't matter what teachers are. They should be prepared and willing to meet families and teach all kids. But in the future, is there anything that this language would be able to do to prevent a superintendent from doing what previous superintendents have done with people's bodies and positions? And if there's not, what does it matter what the records are?
I don't know. I can't answer that question.
to me, it gives us safety. I mean, you would have to prove to the person being transferred that it's for good. I mean, if they asked, you would have to tell them what. And it would be...
It doesn't say that.
Yeah, it doesn't say that. It's true. It doesn't say that. You might like it to
That's
say
what you
that.
wanted to say, then you better rewrite it.
Jay, go
I
ahead.
make the motion to delete bullet number 5.
Second.
Second by Seth. Any other comments? Yes, no? All in favor of that motion? That will be Rob, Seth, Chris, Pat, Jay, and Brad. Those against? That will be Seth and Judy.
Abstain.
Oh, sorry, Sean and Judy. Eldred?
Abstain.
Right, Eldred is abstaining. Sorry, Sean.
Abstain. That doesn't make sense.
Eldred is,
Mumbling.
no, he's abstaining.
Can I call the question and vote on this?
We can, assuming there's no other comments. All in favor of the policy minus bullet number 5? Raise your hand. So we're voting. It's been a while. I'm trying to get through this. So we're voting on the policy as presented minus bullet number 5. Right? Yeah. Okay. So that is Sean, Rob, Seth, Chris, Pat, Jay, and Brad. Those opposed? Those abstaining? Judy and...
I oppose.
Judy opposes. Eldred, you're opposing?
I abstain.
And Eldred is abstaining. So we got... These votes are getting harder and harder.
I move the personnel reports as presented.
Thank you, Sean. Second? Second by Brad. Any questions, comments on the personnel report? All in favor? That will be Judy, Rob, Eldred, Seth, Chris, Pat, and Jay. Those opposed will be Sean and Brad. And thank you. I finally got through the last couple of votes. That was starting to get hard. Any other business by the board or the superintendent? The bell's still awake. It's all good. And you can see upcoming days of importance. A committee meeting near you. Anything else, guys?
Just to note that the Human Resources Committee meeting scheduled for tomorrow is canceled. And it's not on the agenda, but just it has been taken out since the last one.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle. It's always good to hear from Danielle at some point in the meeting. So we're good. We're adjourned without objection. Thank you, everyone.
Did we move to adjourn a second?
We did all that.
Somehow.
I mean, I read the personnel report. I read the report, but I.